Welcome to the Remnant Radio Show, where we're living and learning a restoration lifestyle. This is Nitsa Moshe, and this is part 2 of the two witnesses versus the destroyers of the earth. So today, in part 2, I'm going to just review a little bit of what we covered in part 1 of the two witnesses versus the destroyers of the earth. We identified who the two witnesses were, in that they were the two olive trees, the two menorahs, and the two houses of Israel, i.e. Ephraim, and or a majority of believers, Christians who observe the feast, the Sabbath, who embrace the Torah, who embrace the scriptures from the Genesis to Revelations, and also have the testimony of Yeshua and the blood of the Lamb. And then we have Judah, who is the other house, who will together walk hand in hand with the house of Ephraim. So it's the house of Ephraim and the house of Judah. There may or may not be two individual witnesses as leaders of those two houses. And this is when the witnesses, as Yahweh's people, are empowered. And so we go through that, and it's when they are calling in unity together in Jerusalem for the repentance and warning of the coming of the Lord, or the coming of the Moshiach. Okay, and you can watch that in part 1. Then we got into who were the destroyers of the earth. So I'm just going to kind of take off from a PowerPoint page back just before I started wrapping up part 1, and then we'll just go forward from there as a little ending review there. His kingdom come, the seventh trumpet. And again, the Moshiach returns during the seventh trumpet, which is Yom Teruah, the Feast of the Trumpets, as we call it. And I encouraged you to go do a study on the trumpets, understand the feasts, the Moedim, the appointments. And so this is when the kingdom of Yeshua, or the Moshiach, is established. And we referenced 1 Thessalonians. It says, "But I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that you sorrow not, even as others which have no hope. For if you believe, or we believe, that Yeshua, or Yahushua, which means Yod He Vav He, Yahuwah, Yahweh, Yehovah, however you want to say that, saves or delivers," is what his name is. Because remember, he didn't come in his own name. He came in the name of his Father, of the Elohim, whose name is Yod He Vav He. And for if we believe that Yeshua, or Yahushua, rose again, and even so them which sleep in Yeshua will Elohim bring with him. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive, or the remnant at that time, and remain unto the coming of the Lord, shall not prevent them which are asleep. And again, there's going to be a resurrection that's described in Revelations, and we want you to compare that resurrection and the same hour of the day in the afternoon as when Yeshua died on the cross. And then there were those who resurrected out of the graves then. "For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout." And again, I think 1 Thessalonians 4:16 is referring again to the return of the Moshiach in Revelations after the witnesses are raised from the dead. "For the Lord himself shall descend from the heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of the shofar," or that is a shofar. It gets translated as trump or trumpet in the scriptures in English. "And the dead in the Christ, which is the Moshiach, which is the anointed one, shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet Yahweh," or the Lord, Yeshua, "and in the air, so shall we ever be with the Lord." And again, do a word study on the Greek word harpazo, which gets translated into caught up, which means to be seized, and I believe is the rapture, or at least one of the raptures. I know there are a few teachers out there that teach there may be more than one, but this is the one that Yahweh gave me a vision for, that I expressed in part 1. And compare this do a word search on this word caught up, harpazo, G726 in the Strongs. So just kind of, that's a review from kind of where we left off last time. And again, this is a picture of Jerusalem. The witnesses will be up there on that Temple Mount. This is the Kidron Valley. Over here on the right is where Yeshua would have hung on Golgotha across the Kidron Valley up into the Garden of Gethsemane, this area here. And then these were the graves with the stones on them, because in Israel they don't put flowers on them, they put stones, because we are the sons of Israel. The people are the stones. You're building your house with stones. And if you tear the word apart, ben is son or children, and the aleph is the so in a way you're kind of the aleph, the children or the sons of Yahweh. And we talked a little bit about the abomination desolation, that you really, in my opinion, I could be wrong, but I really believe that the pattern will recycle, and the abomination desolation that happened with Antiochus will happen again in the same day, same month. It's around the winter solstice. It's different on the Hebrew calendar, but it's the ninth month. And I believe this is what we're going to see again. And this is where this great tribulation begins at this point. And Mark 13:24 through 26 says, after the tribulation, the sun darkens, just as it did during the times of the crucifixion and the witnesses. The two are very much alike in that when Yeshua died, there was the sky darkened, there was an earthquake, I believe, and the graves opened, and there was a resurrection. This is the same after the time of the resurrection of the two witnesses. And the heavens are shaken. Could it be meteorites falling, satellites? When the scriptures talk about stars, remember in ancient Israel, stars was basically something shining in the sky. So today, it could be a comet, it could be a falling star, it could be a meteorite, it could be an asteroid, it could be a satellite, okay? And we need to have that block logic, because it's about the function and purpose and the energy behind everything that's created in the Word. And then there are the angels that gather the elect at this time. So then we talked about who are the destroyers of the earth. They rebel against Yahweh. And of course, we have that with the satanic rituals, satanic people, Illuminati, the deep state, the pagans, the masses out there who live in rebellion against the Creator. The destroyers destroy Yahweh's people and His creation. They use chemtrails, they use HARP, they use weather manipulation to declare war on the people of the earth. They use vaccinations. And we have 5G coming, and we actually have it, and that is also giving the same symptoms, and it coagulates the blood. A person can just die, and you can watch them die, and you don't really know what they're dying from. It could just be energy shot at them, basically, focused at them or around them. We have glyphosate, is put into the soil and our plants, and we have seeds that are reproducing, that puts farmers and whole communities throughout the world out of business, dependent and always in poverty, to be able then to either die, commit suicide. Many farmers do in other countries because they gave in to the seeds from the seed companies, and then the seed companies, which are owned by the higher ups of the wicked men of destroyers of the earth, then they own the land and the farms, and then they control all the food. They control our clothing, they could control the flax, the linen, they could control the wool, they could control the soap, they can control, of course, the plastics that come from the black oil and petroleum byproducts. They are the same people, the destroyers are the people who, instigate and propagate abortion. And then, people are deceived and or turn away and don't love Yah, and they end up with abortions. The cosmetic industry, actually, if years ago, if you want to do some research, they would use fetal tissue in their cosmetics, and I don't think a lot of people really know that, especially in skincare products, pharmaceuticals. You have to ask yourself, you have to be wise that when they say not tested on animals, evolutionists can call human animals, and they want the people who are animal lovers to think everything's good. But if it's not tested on animals, it could have been tested on or through fetal tissue. So you have to kind of, I know it's terrible to think the way they think because we can't even sometimes begin to imagine, but we need to be aware that their thinking is much, much different than ours. And then the other thing is if we're using something natural, totally natural, not the natural companies who also put a lot of other chemicals and things in it, why do we even have to experiment or test on animals or people for that matter? I mean, in a sense, because if it's natural and safe, there's just going to be a few individuals that may have reactions. And then again, their reactions are probably because of a buildup of toxins in their body from the chemtrails, the vaccinations, et cetera. So it's kind of a vicious circle. And then, of course, we have pharmaceuticals. And 95 to 97% of all people in this country are on some kind of meds. And I asked a doctor once who came into their office, they said about 70% or more in the young teenagers, et cetera. So most kids and young adults are on a pharmaceutical. And even the church at large just easily turns to that instead of prevention, number one, for health, and knowing or asking and demanding that there would be natural alternatives to many things so that it doesn't become the norm. Vengeance is mine, saith Yahweh. And so we know that he is angry in the scriptures. He comes to take vengeance upon those who have destroyed his people and destroyed the earth. The destroyers of the earth, they are destroyed by their own works. I believe the figs, although there could be pieces of asteroids, meteorites, etc., coming, but we have to remember there's lots of satellites up there that are going to come down. And those satellites are there for tracking and communication. That is their quoted words, actually, from John F. Kennedy at the Space Center. It used to be listed right there when you would go to visit there at the space launching place and Cape Canaveral. And we just couldn't comprehend back in those days what that meant, that they would track and listen in to everything we say and do. Okay, we didn't really comprehend that back then. And most people just didn't pay attention. All they could look at was, oh, the technology is good. In other words, the apple or the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which if you think about that fruit symbol on that computer product, really says it all. Bite into the knowledge of good and evil, and it will destroy us. And we thought it tasted good and we thought it looked good, but it's killing us. So the destroyers of the earth are going to be killed by their own works. The rocks, the stars, the figs, the satellites, whatever, are going to be falling. They're going to be hiding underground or wanting to hide under rocks, but it will be their self-destruction. I will mention briefly, I'm trying not to get this censored, but the person who put up the satellites and are putting, I think, over 60 a month right now. Many people think his cars are wonderful. He also controls and owns a lot of financial institutions. He was part of starting, say, PayPal. He has underground boring companies, which, of course, is involved in building these underground places. And he is also putting, in a private sector, putting thousands of satellites up into space. I ignored the situation for a long time until one day, because I always think in words, and Father shows me words and symbols in the ancient Hebrew. I started pulling apart his name in ancient Hebrew, and what I came up with is pretty interesting, and it's like really like without Yahweh and faith in what he's going to do. It's very, very scary. But let me just say that the Hebrew word that is much like his name is Elyon, which means God Most High. And his last name is a smell, and it's not necessarily a good smell. So think about that and do a little bit of investigation on that person, okay? Elyon, Most High, who's the satellite rocket ship program, etc., is named the Dragon. So maybe we need to look at another layer of understanding when we talk about the dragon in the heavens bringing down a third of the stars. Is it a third of the stars, as in stars, or is it a third of the satellites? Okay. So those are some things to think about. I just want to stir you up and pay attention a little bit there. And so here are some of the pictures. This is where we left off last time. Wi-Fi, cell phone towers, radar. This, I believe, is a SpaceX satellite, but I'm not sure. We've got, maybe different falling stars, asteroids, etc. We have weather control. We have, a web of satellites all around the world, around the Earth. If you're flat earthers, I don't have a picture of satellites circuiting around the Earth. So whether you're flat Earth or round Earth, that's not, I think, the point. The point is that there is a web around the Earth here, okay? It would be very interesting for Rob or someone to discuss that. I'd like to see that and how that would work and how that would play out, how it would, actually look and that. This was last April. I got this off the internet, which of course we don't know everything is true. It could be much more than this or not at all. But there were, interestingly, on April the 1st, I'm not sure if that was an accident. I would have to go back and look at when Pesach was, but there's a correlation, I believe, here. There were 2,666 satellites as of April 1st, 2020. In August 2020, and we're almost at the very end, going into September, SpaceX launched 655 Starlink satellites. They plan to launch 60 more per Falcon flight, with launches as often as every 2 weeks in 2020. So my suggestion to you is to know that the enemy is very serious. He knows his time is short. The only way, remember, that they can be artificially omnipotent and omnipresent is to digitize your world. And we have helped them do it. We are pretty much all guilty, not knowing that we were putting a noose around our neck. In total, nearly 12,000 satellites are planned to be deployed, with a possible later extension to 42,000. That's basically the number of man. 4 and 2 is 6. You could look at that also as 7 days of rest, 6 days of man, but 42 is, interesting number. I did put his name here on the screen. El Elyon. There's the old Amy Grant song, El Shaddai, and then she mentions that word in there, El Elyon, Adonai. The God Most High, my Lord, is an Aleph, Lamed, Nun, without the Yod, which is the giver of the hand. So is it possible that this Elon, without the Yod, is a taker? And again, his SpaceX Dragon spacecraft, I heard them talk and refer to it at the launch here a couple months ago as the Black Castle. Everything was black and white. If you paid attention to any of that, they were sending messages. And I talked a little bit about his last name. I won't go into that. I have papers of research I did just in piles of notes if you're interested in that. Again, you can reach me through remnantremedy.com. There's an email, or you can find me on Facebook, Nitsa Moshe, Remnant Remedy. We also have a private group that I sometimes put some things out, well, usually on health, essential oils, herbs. But sometimes I put other things like posting things for online events for Take on the World or Messianic Lamb Radio or whoever I'm working with, maybe. So we also have a newsletter. A lot of things I put out, I don't put out anywhere else except for in the newsletter. So that would be something you might want to subscribe to. So one of the things I also notice about these satellites is, it used to be kind of mostly government controlled, but now it's private. And the thing about private is that then the government isn't accountable to you, the citizens of this country, and they don't have to have public records and all this other information to you. Because it's under private. And then, of course, under private, they don't really have to reveal too much to us at all. They have to maybe reveal it to the government or whoever allows them to do that, the regulations of that. So this is a picture of something I found online, and I actually, you should go check it out if you really want to kind of research this information. There's a website called the Union of Concerned Scientists. And this particular one has a satellite database. It's got in-depth details. Now, of course, this needs to be updated, but it has in-depth resources on 2,666 satellites currently orbiting the Earth, including their country of origin, their purpose, and other operational details. Now, when I visited Cape Canaveral several years ago, they would go down and show you each of the missions to put things up like satellites, but many of them were top secret. They just didn't tell you at all. And of course, this is only as of, it says it updated April 1st, and we know how many more satellites have been put up there since April, especially they've just been mushrooming in the numbers since this pandemic. So again, I believe the enemy knows. And, there's a lot of things out there saying that we're going to have asteroids, meteorites, etc. Between now. Some are saying on election day. And I just want to suggest to you that they could be from Yahweh directly himself, but they could also be caused or results of or an imitation of the power that they have in the heavens through this artificial ability to declare war on us with fire and tornadoes and hurricanes and things falling from the sky. And there's obviously a rush to get so much more up into space to control and do these things. So, but on the day of the Lord, which is the light of the Lord, and I explained that a little bit in part 1, that is going to be all Yahweh himself. Right now, he's allowing the enemy to do what he needs to do, but that's to purge and wake up people to receive salvation. And it is to put his believers in a crucible to take out the dross. And I know that living here in America, even those of us who are fervent for him, we get lazy sometimes. We get comfortable sometimes, and we need to be fired, and we need to be pressed. And in Revelations, Yeshua says, I counsel thee to purchase from me, to be fired in gold and eye salve. And we won't go, that's another teaching. Sorry about that. So here's a picture of who has satellites then and now. And it's a comparison from 1966, which I think is kind of interesting. 9 could be 6, upside down, 666. They definitely use their numbers versus 2016. So let's see, this is 76, 86, 96, 2006, 2016. So on a jubilee or 50 years of what they are looking at, they're showing you. On the left side, which maybe you're right, and on the shorter part of the map, it'll show the countries who had satellites and those that are space launching countries with satellites. So basically America was, and maybe it looks like, I think it's Greenland, and I'm not sure that what that is on the right there, in South America, just Greenland and the U.S. had the power to space launch. Then look at 2016. We've got Russia, China, India, Iran, and then many of the European countries who have the ability to put satellites up into space. And of course, they really need to come into the picture because this is about warfare in the heavens. You know, the president here just the last year, within the last year, we now have a whole military just based around the space, right? We just don't have Air Force, Navy, Marines, or Coast Guards for the waters, right? We have now a space force. So this is very interesting. And most people, you know, don't pay much attention to it. And, you know, why should we? Especially my generation, we weren't brought up in it to be knowledgeable about it. It just happened. And, you know, and then this younger generation, they're not, you know, half the stuff or more than half the stuff is taken out of everything. So they don't get to learn or study these things. Let's just look. There's also on this website for the concerned scientists. There's the satellite quick facts. And this is as of March 2020. So from this fact list, we see that, and again, this needs to be updated, okay? Because there's a lot more up there now. But the U.S. had 1,300, a little over 1,300. Russia had 169. China had 363, and the other countries had 807 operating satellites. I think the LEO, the MEO, the elliptical, and the GEO, those are all terminology that needs to be translated. I want to say one's lower elevation, mid elevation. I don't know, so I have to research those. Total numbers of U.S. satellites, which were 1,327, 30 of them are for civil use. So I'm thinking maybe that's for broadcasting, television, or maybe your phones, cell phones. But then maybe not. Maybe that's for weather announcements, etc. To, you know, whatever. We'll have to figure that out when we study it. Commercials, 935. So that's probably the one with, you know, telecommunications and Verizon and AT&T and all those different things. Government, 170. And military is 192. And again, this is all needs to be updated. It'd be interesting to know of all these SpaceX, Elon ones who, you know, has a name similar to the Most High. What are the purposes of all theirs? Are they just all commercial? Are they military? What are the purposes? Of course, they're getting very rich off the people on the face of the earth. Now, I want to just share with this. I cannot find this movie anymore. Someone had given me this movie on a VHS tape, about, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe. And it was a real eye-wakener. And this is for a person who, I was in telecommunications in the 70s. I was a telecommunications manager for a large corporation, Lowry's, who was bought by Lipton, who is owned by Unilever, which is, you know, trace that all the way up, which I think is deeply seated into the world order, underground. But this movie here, you can find it. I think it's an Italian producer. It's also called In Ascolto, but in English, it was called The Listening. It's a 2006 movie. So yeah, it was about 15 years ago. I must have got it right after it came out. So it was like 14 years. Based on the mass surveillance operations since 1952 that were conducted by the NSA with the aid of private corporations. Again, this has to all go through, this all goes to the satellites and the space program. One of the things, just as a side note on this, that was quite frightening is that they literally could give a person a chemical lobotomy, which they did in this movie because somebody knew something accidentally, I believe it was. Someone found something accidentally and got involved in this. And this also really leads up to, you understand this, you'll understand more about Snowden, why he left this country, etc. It was an Italian director, yes, and they debuted the movie and explored the dire consequences that can arise due to excessive corporate influence on a government agency set up for mass surveillance. And because my background in the 70s was in telecommunications, this is the reason why I don't put a lot of photos out there, didn't even do them for like a long time, up until I was forced to, and when I was doing survival real estate in Northwest Montana, North Idaho, and I had to have a picture on to be part of a professional organization for certified aromatherapists. But I really didn't want to do that. And then, of course, nowadays, people just take pictures of people and put them on. And every time you take a picture of your family and your people, your children, and put it out there, they're doing facial recognition and they're tracking, etc. So you really need to rethink maybe some of that. On the other hand, sometimes, you have to say, I'm out there anyway, especially if you're a teacher, leader. You're like, I'm either going to preach the truth till they kill me or I die or Father takes me because he numbered my days. They can't touch me outside of his will. Everything has to pass his throne anyway. But at the same time, we need to be wise. We need to be discreet. Anyway, this movie describes the Echelon program, which was originally a secret code name of a surveillance program. And so I'll read this. Echelon, originally a secret government code name, is a surveillance program, signals intelligence, which is SIG-INT, collection and analysis network, operated by the U.S. with the aid of 4 other signatory states to the UK-USA Security Agreement: Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. Notice Russia's not in there, as known as the Five Eyes. Created in the late 1960s to monitor the military and diplomatic communications of the Soviet Union and its Eastern Bloc allies during the Cold War. I grew up during the Cold War. I was in the military, Air Force military. We called them brats. And so we used to have, at least one day a year, maybe 2, where I had to not go to school, stay in my room, stay in the house, because we had bombing raid practices all day to prepare for war with Russia. And this was during the Cold War. The Echelon Project became formally established in 1971. And remember, like when chemtrails finally started coming to the newspapers in 2014, 15, when we were trying to tell people, back in the 80s and 90s, and especially the 90s about it, it was always a conspiracy theory. And now, it's mainstream news. And sadly, because of that conditioning, there's many people in my age group who still think it's a conspiracy theory, even though I believe, someone can correct me on this, I believe that the president has signed an executive order related to that topic. But most anything that was considered a conspiracy theory actually is true like 20 to 50 years before it hits mainstream. It's like they quit fighting it because there's people who are always trying to expose it. This may be the case with flat Earth. I don't know, but Nephilim, etc. The UFOs. I mean, there's just so many things. The things that they've been doing and programming, pre-programming, and telling us ahead of time, and especially in movies, cartoons, etc. So just realize a lot of things that I would never watch because I just don't feel like they're wholly set apart and worth my time. I actually go watch sometimes if I can handle it because I want to know what they're telling us. And Father, will give me discernment to put the pieces together. Although I don't recommend that you just go out and watch those things, but most believers do, and they don't think. What concerns me when my children watch a movie is if they don't see what the propaganda is behind the movie. That is what because I really want them to learn to discern and take that apart and understand what's really trying to go on, what they're trying to implant. a lot of like the superheroes. I mean, Yeshua and the two witnesses are going to be the superheroes. The apostles who were healing, they're the superheroes. But everything done in these Marvel characters, etc., Star Wars, the Force be with you, and all these different things, and these powers with AI and Iron Man and Spider-Man. I mean, that's mixing. That's mixing of seed. That's mixing with digitized technology with man, and it's all damaging the image of Elohim. So people who watch this, and children, adults, etc., they don't like. It just seems to me it should hit them that this that I'm watching is an affront to the Creator, because it's projecting man. Oh, whoa, he's better? No, he's not better. I don't care what kind of powers you have, if they're not from Elohim, that He implanted in you, is gonna be a sidekick. There's gonna be something that's gonna come back to get you, just like the technology is coming back to get us, okay? It's a mixing and a changing of the creation. And of course, we're facing this looking at the coming mark, possibly the coming vaccination, etc. So we're buying into this. And, with generations just raised up to think, oh, you can get a certain shot or serum or whatever to become these superheroes, that's conditioning to think it's okay, So just saying. So by the end of the 20th century, the system referred to as echelon had evolved beyond its military and diplomatic origins into a global system for the interception of private and commercial communications, mass surveillance, and industrial espionage. So I just want you to realize there is a spider web over us and or around us, depending on your earth concept. It's pretty sticky, and it's not there to give you life. It's there to eat you sooner or later, like a spider will do once he catches you. And again, these are two pictures. The movie I had on the right was the cover that I had, called The Listening. And the one on the left that I usually find, I can't find it to download or anything, but maybe someone can find it somewhere. I think it's really worth watching to give you a bigger picture of what's going on. If not, just pray, Father, open your eyes. This is a picture I could find with, I'm just trying to get across the part that there's a grid or a spider web of satellites around you, okay? Hasatan, the dragon, wants to digitize your world. Digitization is the process of converting information into digital format, in which the information is organized into bits. The result is the representation of an object, image, sound, document, or signal by generating a series of numbers that describe a discrete set of points or examples. The Hebrew language is much like this. I mean, when you have a Hebrew letter, it's like a little child's wooden building block. One side is the sound, one side is a picture, one side is a meaning, and there's just different aspects of one letter, and that letter is also a number. So for believers, especially Christians who think gematria and those kinds of things is like witchcraft or whatever, it's not. The world can be seen from a point of language, which, language and letters and words and connections are my gift, or it can be seen as, because for every letter, there's a number system. There's a number behind that. There's an energy, a frequency, a digitized piece of energy to that. And that only makes sense when we consider everything created has a signature frequency, some kind of energy to distinguish it from something else. I have a son who thinks in numbers all the time, and it just boggles my mind. So please understand, this is based on this system that was created by the Father. Technology is nothing new. It is all based off the energy, the Debar, the Amar of Yahweh Elohim, from the Aleph to the Tav, the creator of the universe. So we just need to understand that. And the only way the enemy can do it is by digitizing or taking something that Yahweh's already created, because again, he understands frequencies and energy. This is why those of us in healing modalities, we look at the energy of herbs, we look at the energy of essential oils, we look at energy in lasers, energy in sound, and things like that. And so we're trying to reclaim and show the world that it belongs to Yahweh's, always has, but it's been perverted and defiled and ascribed to someone or something other than the creator from which it came from. I remember in the 70s, my first facsimile, we called them facsimile because it was a simulation of something that was, basically put in like a printer. You lift up the lid, you put the picture on, and it just amazed me that I could send a document from Southern California to across the world to another European country for the company I worked for, which ended up being the telecommunications manager. Just blew my mind. And, how is it? I mean, if you think about that, to younger generations before it's 100, 200, 300 years ago, that would look like witchcraft, right? So why is it witchcraft if we learn how to use certain things that Yahweh created to bring healing? It's the person behind it. Who is their God? Who are they depending on? Are they manipulating that energy that Father gave them, that they actually got from the enemy who understands it all? Or are they looking at the awe of the creation of Elohim and what he created and how he gave us these things and how to use them for healing and for a better life, for a blessing? So that's, I guess, maybe how I got all into frequencies and energy, because I understood. I also worked for a printing press, huge printing press that did U.S. News, Time Magazine, People Magazine. And so I saw the huge little dot matrix color things on the mock-ups and how all those big dots, digitized colors, made a beautiful picture one over another, which I guess we call pixels. The telephone back in those days, the television, tele means distance or far off. So from far off, we have a vision and we bring it up close to you. We're doing it right now through this program, through our cell phones, or we can be bringing sound for like phone, because phono is sound. So again, the enemy has been understanding and knowing about digitization of the world because he knows it was created through those, in a sense, digitizations of the Aleph to the Tav. Things were thought electromagnetically from the creator, and then it was spoken through the vocal cords as Dabar. So it went from Amar, from the head, the mind, the thinking. From Genesis to when Noah is told to get out of the ark, it gets translated as he said, Yahweh said, God said, Adam and Eve said, blah, 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 blah. But it's not, if you look at it and really tear it apart, it was not Dabar in that sense. It was the word Amar, which if you break it down in an ancient Hebrew pictograph form, I did a whole show on this, teaching at a congregation. It was by Amar, which can be translated as the thoughts or from the mind flowing out from the head. So when Yahweh, from Genesis, when he communicated through Amar. When Adam and Eve communicated with each other or to Yahweh, it was through Amar. All the way up when Yahweh first told Noah, it was through a thought. Now, I'm not going to be dogmatic about that, but if you take the letters apart, that's basically what it shows us. And so this only makes sense. Like, if you're close to your husband or wife or a friend or sister or brother, it's like, you kind of just read their thoughts, or you just get a download, or you both look at each other and you're both thinking the same thing, right? Versus the voice. And there's some scholarly work towards that too that I share in that teaching on the Remnant Remedy YouTube channel. Look for the Battle of the Living Stones, Amar and Dabar. But just imagine that Noah, all the way up till Noah, it could have just been a thought because it was Amar. He just got a download from Yahweh on what to build, how to build it, and then when it was time to get out of the ark, now it wasn't Amar, it was Debar, okay, which can be translated into the vibrations, frequencies, and energy put in order. But it requires usually a vocal cord. So Yahweh, when he speaks to you, right? Do you hear usually a vibration? Does it come to you from a sound? No, it comes from within. It comes down. It's a thought. Sometimes it's in your gut, in your spirit. But anyway, I'll get off of that because I got to get on with the subject. So Yahweh is everywhere. Remember, Hasatan, the dragon, can only digitize your world so he can be artificially omnipotent and omnipresent. He cannot create anything. He has to take those original power of words or frequencies or thoughts from Yahweh to do anything. He has to take and manipulate. He cannot create. He can only form from Yahweh's creation. Psalm 34:18, Yahweh is nigh or close unto them that are broken heart and save such that are of a contrite spirit. Remember, he is close to the humble. He is close to the broken. He is not close to the high and lofty. He is not close to those who are arrogant. For thus saith the high and lofty one, which he is high and lofty. He is the one who is to be elevated, that inhabits eternity, whose name is holy, set apart, kadosh. Kadosh could actually be broken up into the light through the door pressed, which could be another way of looking what is kadosh or holy. I dwell in the high and holy set apart place, the place of light pressed in the door. And Yeshua says, I am the door. With him also that is of contrite and humble spirit, to revive or to give life or breath, the spirit of the humble, and to revive the heart of the contrite ones. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God, Elohim. Resist, which means to stand against, to contrast with Debar and Amar, with your words and your thoughts. You want to resist the devil, which is the dragon, which is the false accuser, and he will flee from you. Draw nigh to Elohim, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded ones. Unlike Yahweh, the dragon cannot be naturally present. He can only he can only by distance send a thought. One of the examples with that would be SSS technology, which is silent spectrum something, I can't remember. And they use this in the Gulf War. And we actually knew someone who was there in that war at that time when they experimented to fine-tune and test that technology, wherein they sent thoughts to the Arabs, the Muslims they were fighting. This was during the time of Osama bin Laden. And they were in their foxholes, they were winning, but they used this energy, this silent technology to send messages, and it made them crawl out of their foxholes and give up their guns and cry like babies. This can happen with the technology that's going on out there. So you always have to question and know the word of God. When you're receiving a thought, if you're receiving something that's making you ill, sometimes it's not what you're doing, it's what you're subjected to. And it can make you sick. If that thought doesn't come to you and it doesn't line up with the word of Yahweh, then you know it's not from him. It's from the enemy, and it can be projected to you. Yahweh will never leave you. Be strong and of good courage. Fear not, nor be afraid or dread of them. Fear not. To not be afraid is a commandment. It is not a suggestion, because the only thing that we are ever supposed to fear or to be concerned about is that which can kill our soul or our spirit, more specifically our spirit. Fear not him who can kill the body, right? The dragon with his little lasers, whatever his energy that he shoots at you or brings a devastating fire or whatever it is. He's got a fake fire, but Yahweh's got a real fire. And remember that the witnesses are going to have this energy, this fire that's going to come forth. Be strong and of good courage. Fear not, nor be afraid or dread them. For Yahweh, your Elohim, he is that goes with you. He will not fail you nor forsake you, even unto death. Remember, trust and wait are the hardest commandments. If you trust and wait, then all the other commandments pretty much fall into place. Again, it's where you put your trust, where you put your eternity into. It will be what gives you the boldness and the courage through the power of his Spirit to face the enemy even unto death, to stand up and do what is right when the time is called. There's times to, be in hiding and do guerrilla warfare, and there's times when you just got to come out and be bold and called on the carpet. Remember, Yeshua said, don't worry what you're going to say. I will empower you to say it, whatever you need to be able to go through. And our great brothers and sisters and martyrs around the world throughout history had that same power and could go to their death singing and praising the living Elohim because they knew this reality is temporary. There are over 100 verses that Elohim is with you, and he will not leave his own. Even in death, remember, death cannot separate us from him. Hebrews 13:5, let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as you have. For he has said, I will never leave you, nor forsake you, or leave you behind. I know many of you maybe didn't have the right or felt like you got what you should have. Some of you were actually downright abused or abandoned by your mothers and fathers. Remember, every one of us needs to learn that no matter what we walk through, no matter what we do, Elohim, Aleph Tav, Yeshua, Yahweh, Yod He Vav He, his spirit, his ruach, his breath, his life is in us. And when this body dies, all it can do is expire that ruach, that breath of life, to return to the Father. Remember, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. So he says, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. And once you know that, you can forgive usually. That's where the forgiveness comes in, to forgive our mothers and fathers or our exes, who, did horrible things to us, whoever it was in your life. And when you can come to that place where you say, it was good for my soul to be afflicted that I might learn your statutes. It is good that I've been through these things. It is good that you chose that vessel to do evil to me, that I might learn your presence, that I might learn to be with you. I might learn that you are more important than life itself. Then when you're thankful for those vessels, those unclean vessels or those vessels that weren't there to bless you, you're thanking him because just like with Job, he allowed it to cross his throne because he's concerned about your eternal position, not just your current physical one. And it hurts. Circumcision hurts. Circumcision of the heart, circumcision of the spirit hurts, and it bleeds. We will never deny the pain, but that pain is worth the gain, because once you've gone through these things and you know him and you know how he's saved you and how he's delivered you and how he's been with you and how he's walked you through, nobody can really challenge you or scare you because you got him as a backup. Really, he is the foundation. He's not just a backup. He is it. And so nobody can take that away from you once you learn those lessons that way. Nobody. They can't cajole you into certain things. I went through a period of 3 years where every day I didn't know if I was going to lose my 2 girls. And one time a person came to me who paid my husband with a check that bounced. And he had a uniform, and I was going to turn in the uniform, but the check bounced. So I went back to the office because he was already out working another job far away. And I went in and said, I'll be glad to give you these uniforms if you'll give me a good check, And the whole reason he had to quit was because the owner of the company told them to do some things that weren't right. And when my husband said he would quit, he said to him, nobody's going to quit for their God. Everybody needs a paycheck. Well, that was a challenge. We either believed God and depended on him or we didn't. So we had to tell the man, yes, we do. We do believe that he is our sustainer and not you. So we can't do what you're asking us to do. So anyway, they threatened to call the police on me because I would not give them the uniforms. And I'd already been through the trial for 3 years of losing my daughters every day. So it was like, this is nothing, dude. Like, this doesn't scare me. Call the cops, like, you can put me in jail. It's not as bad as losing my children, right? So, again, every trial, we need to be thankful. We need, the beginning of every victory and every ability to go through every trial comes from when we start just praising him and giving him a sacrifice of praise. It is not a willing, I feel like it praise. It is a sacrifice of saying, thank you, Father. I do not know how you are going to make anything good out of this. I do not know why I should thank you or praise you because I am hurting so bad. And can't you see what they're doing to me? But when you can will in your heart, your mind, and start speaking thank you and praises to him through the hardest of things, you will begin to start going through those things like water just rolling off your back. And I believe actually will usher in perhaps a quicker deliverance, or at least it doesn't seem so bad because you are walking through a position of power, relying on him and thanking him. He's not like other guys that wants to sacrifice a lot, wants you to sacrifice a lot of different things and, like other gods do. He just wants your praise. He just wants your trust. Again, trust, wait, wait upon me. So, he says, I'll never leave you, I'll never forsake you, so that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me, even unto death. And I'm just going to say it again. The day that we're living in and the days that we're facing, we need to learn to surrender ourselves so that we will walk in boldness, even unto death, so that we might gain life. I know the tendency is, what can I do to save myself? What can I do to prepare? What can I do to endure? How am I going to save my children? How am I going to save my household? And those are all good, but they need to be based on wisdom and not your number one foundation. Your number one foundation is we will obey him. We'll do what we can do as he provides, but we're prepared to meet the Lord. We're prepared to stand against the enemy and not let him manipulate us. Live to die, not save your life. Revelations 12, 9 through 11. And the great dragon was cast down. And again, I'm just now thinking, the great dragon. Is it Hasatan himself? Is the representation of him in the dragon of the satellites in the sky? Is it both? Remember, in Hebrew, we got block logic, and we need to go in layers. And the great dragon was cast down. And the old serpent, now remember, the old serpent from the garden uses people and things. He has to host on to people, like demons have to. He has to host on to satellites and digitized technology. He has no life of himself, right? He has nothing natural or original to put out there. So the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil, Hasatan, the deceiver, which deceives the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Remember, an angel can be a star. Angel in Hebrew is a messenger. Was it a messenger of an original angel created in heaven? Is it a messenger as in a satellite? Is it a messenger as in some form of communication through a device? You have to think outside the boundaries here, and look at the whole purpose, function, and how these words are. It's not just one single thing all the time. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, "Now is come salvation and strength in the kingdom in the kingdom of our Elohim, and the power of his Christ, his anointed one, the one who has the oil, the one who has the shemen, the one who has the power, character, and authority, the Moshiach. For the accuser, which is against, opposing, distributing with intensity of our brethren, is cast down." Now, is the power and principality of darkness what we fight? Absolutely. Are there spiritual beings out there? Probably, absolutely. But it can also be artificial. Or is there not a distribution of intense digitization of energy towards the people on the earth? So I think this may be more than twofold even. And so the accuser, who's against, opposing, distributing what? Intensity of our brethren, is cast down. Which accused, actually that means he complains at the Torah or at the law against one. So that's what that accuser means. So is he not against the Torah? Is not that spirit of the Antichrist, that spirit of the world, against the Torah, against the law, against the goodness instructions of how to live your life more abundantly, how to live, period, is before our God, Elohim, day and night. Remember Job, it all had to pass before the throne. It was a test, and it was the battle between Elohim and the deceiver, the dragon. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb. Remember, the life is in the blood. And I believe that life comes into the blood when there's the breath, the oxygen, which I did a thing on, oxygen is the number 8. Number 8's the number on the elemental table. And number 8 is also the representation of restoration. So when we look at our breathing and our numbers and the elements of what comes into our breath and goes out our breath and the elements of the earth, that you can actually tie those to Hebrew letters, and it's just amazing to me what that is. And so oxygen is it's restoration, and we need oxygen to live, to be restored minute by minute, and our cells restored. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word, the debar versus deber. And I explained that debar is usually translated as he said, or the word, which is the vibrations, frequencies of energy put in order. I break that apart in some other teachings. And versus deber, which is the contronym or the opposite, which is the vibrations or frequencies of energy causing chaos, death. So they overcome him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word, the debar, of their testimony, of their witnessing. And they loved not their lives unto death. They trusted Yahweh with their lives unto eternity. Romans 12:1, present your bodies as a living sacrifice. For me personally, this also applied to having children. He's the creator. He plants the seed. If I totally surrender my life to him, then he's the creator. I don't want to hinder what he wants to create in my life. And I applied that, my husband and I, we applied that to having children. That can be a very deep and controversial subject, but I think in essence, it's pretty much very simple. But it takes a great deal of faith and trust and waiting. And again, I'm not here to condemn people who make certain decisions. That's not what I'm here for. I'm just kind of just boiling it down to the simplicity. So present your bodies as living sacrifice. That means to stand up and do what is right, that regardless of the outcome. Be holy, set apart, press through that door of light, acceptable unto Elohim, which is your reasonable service. Remember, I don't know if any of you have studied the feudal system, fealty for the kingdom of heaven. We need to have, we in a sense have a feudal system, and that the earth all belongs to our Lord, like it did during the medieval times. And we swore fealty, or we had this loyalty. And in exchange for the Lord providing us, the Lord of the manor, providing and serving and protecting the people, they in return would fight for the king. They would stand for the king. And so, in a sense, we kind of have a feudal system. One year we did this in our homeschool with some other families, and we, at the end of the school year, we had each of the children do a presentation or whatever, and we set a table for all the fathers who dressed up as lords, and the women were the serfs. Okay, I'm not, I don't really believe that we're just serfs to our husband, but this is what we did for the kingdom reenactment. Anyway, what we did is we had each father take a sword that, they made, and knighted each of the children into the kingdom of heaven, and thanking them for their loyalty and their service. So this, that's how we studied the medieval times, and then I compared it to the kingdom of heaven. So that might be something you want to do with your homeschool program. So, as the Father knoweth me, even so I know the Father, and I, this is Yeshua talking, I lay down my life for the sheep. We are the sheep. The sheep shema. They listen, hear, and obey. They hear his voice, and they follow him. It's the same thing in the kingdom. One of the things that's really interesting about what destroyed one of the major things that destroyed the feudal system, wherein everyone had to become serfs or slaves to the lords, which many times were not good lords. They didn't love and take care of their people. In modern day, there's a movie series called Poldark, and he's always against the other lords because he sees the injustices done to the people. And so in Poldark, he's a good lord, so that's kind of a good example if you haven't watched Poldark. But one of the things that really gave people, the common people, a power during the medieval times was because the bubonic plague came along. Now, it's had its cycles throughout history. If you want a book to read, which I always kind of wanted to rewrite it in a children's version, there's a little book called A Parcel of Patterns. And it takes you through actually like you were living through this small little village during the bubonic plague, and how the believers responded, the true believers versus the English church appointed pastors and believers. And because so many people died during the bubonic plague, and people would be so sick, and so many people would die, they ran out of grave diggers, and so people would actually dig their graves ahead of time so that, there might not be anybody, or so one of their family members could just at least put them into the grave or push them into the grave. But because there were so many people dying and so few people to work the land, the people that were left could demand wages. And by getting wages or something in return for their work, then they eventually could buy their own land and start producing for themselves. And so Father used the bubonic plague as a way to set many people free against the lords that were evil, that weren't treating the people well. So what do we think in modern day? What is he going to do? Because we definitely have lords. If you haven't realized it, we are in bondage. We are not free. But that day is coming. Well, there'll be a second greater exodus when we will be free. And you need to realize that. You need to acknowledge that. We need to have our eyes open to that. We do not live freely to totally worship him, to be free, and to totally own what even we pay for in cash, because we're going to have to pay taxes, etc. So this is just something we need to realize. What do you think he's going to do? He's going to bring plagues back. He's going to, all the things that are going to be happening are things that we have to see the big picture and trust him and wait that it's eventually for the setting up and the freedom and deliverance of his people. Okay, therefore, my Father loves me because I lay my life down that I might take it up again. Peter said to him, Lord, why cannot I follow you now? I will lay down my life for your sake. And Yeshua said, will you lay down your life for my sake? Verily I say unto you, the cock, which again is something totally different than what we think it is from the English, shall not crow until thou hast denied me thrice, 3 times. And greater love hath no man than this, that a man lays down his life for his friends. Hereby perceive that we love of Yahweh, God, because he laid his life down for us, Yeshua in this case, and that we ought to lay down our lives for our brethren. To die is to live, ultimate trust. Be a living sacrifice. Good enough for Yeshua. It was good enough for Yeshua. So what about you? Matthew 10:39, he that findeth his life shall lose it, and he that loses his life for my sake shall find it. Matthew, there's several here, Matthew 16, Mark 8, Luke 9, 17. For whosoever will save his life will lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. In other words, there's a resurrection coming. If you don't get redeemed in some way, in a way that you're losing yourself by giving to others, the ultimate is death, and you will regain it. And if you don't believe that, if you can't accept that, if you don't have that reality in your life, really seek the Lord for it, because that is the bottom line. When everything is stripped from us, when there may be no food, when maybe we're being tortured, maybe we're watching our family starve, when they come to get us for whatever purposes that can happen and has happened and does happen to our believer brothers and sisters all around the world. Because in America, we think, we're going to be saved from that. Sooner or later, every country that turns its face against Yahweh, does abortion, does murder, is immoral and wicked, is destroyed. Okay? So don't think it won't ever happen. The scriptures, I think, are pretty clear on that at the end of days. But whatever it is, we need to be willing to believe and to accept and receive. And I just pray that Yahweh will just give that to you in your spirit, that you know that you know that you know that you can trust and wait upon him, and death cannot separate you from him. And it can't separate your loved ones. You will see them again. All we have to do is choose to have him be our Lord, to be worthy and trusting to fight for him in exchange for the fight that he's given for us to lay his life down. He that loves his life shall lose it, and he that hates his life in this world shall keep it unto eternal life. And again, we have this in Revelations with the overcomers. Like Yeshua, you were born to be a martyr, be a fire starter. I really encourage you to go to YouTube and look up a song called The Fire Starter by Aviad Cohen. He's not with us anymore. It's very sad that he's gone. But I really encourage you to look at all the words of the song. This was something that, when I was preparing and prepping back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I came across his music, it really wasn't the kind of music that I would want to listen to, but it's kind of grown on me. It's kind of techno music. He was a famous Jewish rapper who got saved and knows Yeshua, and he was very talented, a very talented young man who struggled with bipolar. But again, the enemy wanted to take him out. But he had some powerful, powerful music, powerful witnessing. And this song and these first few words is really what made me had to get over myself and fear for my children, fear for what was coming, because I've seen and been watching this for like 30 plus years, okay? And I had to come to that place of, I'm going to die. Sooner or later, I'm going to die. So I have to live like I'm going to die and I have to quit living in fear. Do we plan? Do we homestead? Do we try to do what we can? Sure we do. But we've got to surrender this part of ourselves. So children or Ben are like arrows. They're like the quiver against the kingdom of darkness. And so when you do surrender your life to have as many children as Father allows you to, or whatever children he does give you, they're like the quiver, because if you train them up, and that's really what the Torah means in a sense. It means hitting the mark. It's making a bullseye. We're doing the same with our children. We're training them up to hit the bullseye and to be darts against the kingdom of darkness. Children of light is what we are. When we receive Yeshua, when we receive the covenant, when we receive the Torah, we have that light living within us. And we are to be that living stone. And we are going to be crushed. We're going to be polished. We're going to be, put into heat until we become the beautiful stone that he's going to place in his living stone's tabernacle. And we each have our own place. And a lot of times our brothers and sisters really rub us wrong. Maybe they're not finished being cut. Maybe they're not polished yet. Maybe I'm not polished yet. But we will all fit in and around that chief cornerstone. So I'm going to read just the first few words from this song that really helped me transform my way of thinking, especially when I was walking and facing things in fear for my family and my children. It's Firestarter by Aviad Cohen. What's your name, boy? What's your name, girl? Did you know God has a plan for you up in this world? You are the new breed. You're called to be a martyr. Don't compromise on the truth. Just be a fire starter. Those words didn't sound so good to my flesh, but my spirit knew that's where I needed to go. So glorify your Maker in your own special way. And there's a line in there that says, bench warmers not needed. Amen. Either play or go home. So they call me the fire starter. I bring the holy heat. Don't need no pyrotechnics. Just need this Jesus beat. Anyway, I encourage you to listen to that song. Why digitize your world? Because it's the only way the dragon can be artificially omnipresent and omnipotent with power. Unlike Yahweh, he cannot be present. He can only tally from a distance, right? The deceiver cannot bara. That's the Hebrew word for create in Genesis. He can only asa, which is where it also gets translated in Genesis that then God made. Well, it's really asa in Hebrew, where he formed from what he already spoke forth and made, from the olive to the tav that hovered in the waters, and the water conducts electricity, and that was electromagnetic energy or frequency that he spoke, that I explain in some other teachings. So he can only form or asa from what Elohim has already created. The serpent dragon cannot do anything natural or produce life. There's natural versus unnatural. He can only pervert and defile Yahweh's design, purpose, and function. Think about that with AI. Think about that with the Marvel characters. Think about that with Superwoman. Think about that with, the things that they got planned for us with the vaccination. Purpose for everything under heaven there is. Plans for good, to Baruch, to bless, and not do evil. We have to remember that. We need to pray that Father will reveal to us the bigger picture, or at least be faithful until we can. There's the pharma versus the plants, the trees, the herbs, the etz, which is the trees, which can also be, etzim is bones. It comes from that root word of etz, which is the spine or the frame or the support. Essential oils, eos, energy, debar versus deber, again, the good versus the bad. The earth is becoming more radiated and absorbing more radiation. So we're looking at natural fibers and linen that is supposed to be able to let the energy of Elohim flow through us, and the energy of life at the same time create a barrier and insulate us against those energies that are deber, that aren't good. And then we have natural fibers such as linen, wool, perhaps hemp, versus petroleum, byproduct fibers, and plastics, etc., synthetics. We have vaccinations, which are, I know there's a lot of arguments out there, but I'll tell you plain and simple, again, that was something Father spoke to me directly when I didn't understand, and I was totally pro-vaccination because I was an Air Force brat. That's what everybody did. But Father stopped me dead in my tracks and told me, he asked me, he said, why did you do that to your daughter on her first DBT polio? Because I was grieving. I didn't understand why I was grieving. I mean, it wasn't even a shot. It was oral. And when I got back to the office where I was working with her, I used to take her with me. He said, why did you do that? And I said, well, because every good parent does that, right? And he said, well, what if I chose for her to die from pertussis? And then my mind went, well, if I've totally surrendered everything to you, and you know the days of my life, and you know the hairs on my head and hers, then yeah, if that's what, I started crying. If that's what you want to do, if that's how you choose for her, then it's okay. Then he said to me, don't do it again. And I'm like, okay. No understanding other than he spoke to me. The next day, a girl walks into my office, another woman that I had met at La Leche League a night or two before, just barely met her. And she told me, the Lord told me to come in and ask you, do you vaccinate? And I said, well, as of yesterday, no. She goes, well, I'm supposed to give you this book. And she handed me a book called DBT, A Shot in the Dark. I took that book, I read it. I couldn't get past the first 2 chapters without going, oh my gosh, what are we doing? And so that began my journey of anti-vaccination. And then he showed me how we have an immune system and how we violate that, and how vaccinations are a violation of his word and his Torah. And I think I covered that a little bit in a program I did on chemtrails, part 1 and 2. Anyway, again, I know I'm going to be stepping on some toes here, but I am telling you, this is not something natural that Father wants. And for those of you who have not come to this conclusion already, should have lots more problems when you think about the chemicals that they put into a vaccination, the animal parts that they put in, the fetal tissues that they use. If you're anti-abortion or you're a Christian, then why are you doing these things? Why would it even make sense? But it's because our minds have been deceived. The enemy has been deceiving us for a very long time. And if the Father had not spoken specifically to me, I don't know that I would have ever known anything better, because, again, I was trained, but I also suffered many things as a result of vaccinations that were revealed to me. And then I was vaccinated against my will when my first daughter was born. The nurse just came in and shot me, and within 6 months I had all kinds of disease and reactions to that vaccination. She just came in, didn't even ask. She just says, oh, your chart doesn't say you had German measles. So, and that was also reinforcing what Father was showing me. So, and then I became someone who would, go with other moms to get exemptions for their children. So a lot of background on that. So vaccinations, they're not natural. We have a natural immune system designed within, if we live within the Torah perimeters and lifestyle, biblical lifestyle, there's rules and orders of life. And that's really what the Torah is about. It's not about taking something away from you. It's saying, hey, I created you. Like if I made a car, here's the best way to run your engine. Best oil, best gas. This is how you do it. He knows, Elohim knows what is needed. So he gave us this beautiful word, this beautiful book called the Torah, which means hitting the mark, getting it. Not because I don't love you, but because I do love you, and I want you to know everything there is to know about being blessed, which again is like to bend over and drink from a fresh spring water. To be blessed is Baruch. The enemy can have artificial intelligence, like avatars, robots, integrate technology with humans, etc. But he can't have the original uniqueness of all the things in our frailties that mankind has, that Yahweh gave us. How does this relate today? Let's look at the 7 trumpets. And the 7 angels, which had 7 trumpets, prepared themselves to sound. The first angel, the messenger, sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and the third part of the trees were burnt upon the trees, and all the green grass was burnt. And the second angel sounded, and as it were, a great mountain burning. Could this be a meteorite or a near-earth object with fire that was cast into the sea? In that case, it wouldn't be near Earth. It fell, it hit. Could be a volcano hitting or falling off, but oh, I don't know. I think it's going to be an asteroid or meteorite. And it's bigger than a satellite, okay, because it's the size of the mountain. And the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and a third part of the ships were destroyed, which means we're not getting commerce, we're not getting supplies from Walmart, right? And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and the water and the fountains. It could be the headwaters. You know, in Northwest Montana at Glacier National Park, which really is not glacier, it's a Greenpeace United Nations park, if you pay attention. The headwaters, there's water that comes from there that goes to the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Gulf, and up towards the Hudson Bay. A lot of people don't realize that. The headwaters are there, and that's where the Continental Divide is. So, you know, those headwaters somewhere, if those are the headwaters for the North American continent, could be totally poisoned or destroyed. Revelations 8:11, and the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, or, you know, very, very bitter and poisonous. And many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. Now, this is where we want to come in and say, we need the word of the Lord that says, man does not live by bread alone. And Yeshua says, if you receive of me, basically, you will never thirst. We're going to need that supernatural Holy Spirit water to live during this time. And, you know, it's interesting because NASA is doing research on these gurus who look at the sun, and they take in the energy from the sun that connects to the pineal gland, and they can go very, very long times without eating. I believe this is also related to why we can get very well with energy from raw fruits and vegetables, because those colors, those frequencies, the energy that food gives us is much like the frequencies of energy that can come through the rainbow covenant, which we have a rainbow right in front of us right here. We just can't see it without the right refraction or reflection of the light, right, with water or whatever, which we get to see after rain when the water shines a certain way, etc. But there's a rainbow covenant that Yahweh gave us, and it's not just a rainbow in the sky. It's the frequencies and energy all around us that we need to live. And again, that's part of a whole nother thing I teach with essential oils. So we have this wormwood that is going to be here, that's going to be bitter for our waters. And we're going to need to have, we need to know that what we have in the Spirit, what we have by Yahweh, Yeshua, is more than enough to live eternally, and or even maybe to sustain us here. And the fourth angel sounded, and a third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars. So as the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it. So now, I take this as a day is not 24 hours, simply because I use Genesis to define a day, which is the Boker and the Areb, which is 12 hours of the daylight. So to me, this means that a third part of the 12 hours, where Yeshua said, is there not 12 hours in a day, Yom light, that there's only going to be 9 hours of daylight. Now, it could be a 24 hours, but I don't personally think so because of my studies. So a third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third of it, and the night also. So, and again, this tells us right here, it's also part of the night. So I don't know if I translate that as a third part of the night. It's not, moon's not shining either. So I'm not quite sure I haven't studied that in detail in words. So what are we looking at? The coronavirus, the COVID, the SARS, the SAR. Interesting, SAR is a prince, SAR Shalom, the Prince of Peace. SARS, COVID. Okay. And some people say this COVID is Corona is one of the things it's called. Isn't a corona is a crown, right? So I think this is the crown of the prince of darkness, the dragon. And this is just, are they basically announcing to us they're getting ready to crown the king, the Antichrist, etc., announcing their crowning. Masks, again, is into slave control. Keeping quarantine, the church is gathering to control damage. Are they keeping us the way they are because they know these things are coming? They're preparing and putting all these satellites up in space, right? What are they getting ready to do? What is really going on behind the scenes? Are they planning a miracle in the sky or a show of fire or weather manipulation that Yahweh sent? Or do they know that there's really a meteorite or asteroid coming that they need to plan for? And that's why they've got their bunkers too. So this is, the things that we're countering compared to what's in Revelations. So we have, the 5Gs, the chemtrails, the HAARP, the weather manipulation. We have abortion. We have cosmetics, pharmaceuticals. We have the space program, warfare, tracking, communications, and people to control. 1/3 are destroyed. 1/3 of the trees, 1/3 of the grass, the sea creatures, the ships, the rivers, the headwaters. Our waters become bad. We got 1/3 of the sun, moon, and stars are darkened, and we got 2/3 daylight and moonlight, or 9 hours of each is, I guess, how I sum that up in my notes. Yeshua answered, are there not 12 hours in a day? That's John 11:9. If any man walketh in the day or the light, he stumbles not, for he can see, because he sees the light of the world. Okay, there's the book out there. If you're not familiar, you may want to get Tom Horn's book. Does Revelation 8:10 through 11 describe an asteroid? Is the wormwood star from Revelation 8 already headed toward the Earth? Are NASA and high-level government officials aware of an asteroid that is on the collision course with our planet? Is that why President sanctioned a colossal increase in planetary defense? Do the prophecies from ancient cultures and religions across the globe all point to a catastrophic planetary event that has scientists and politicians taking extreme preventive measures under public radar? This is a description for the book. Earth is not currently prepared for the scope of impact that may be just around the corner, and people in high places know it. Part of this that's kind of soothing to me is that, yeah, this is bad, but if I'm his, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, ultimately, my life is in his hands. But, facing coming vaccinations, facing what's coming, et cetera, for what they have planned for us, all I know is in the scope of things, this coming wormwood is a much bigger problem, okay? And it's part of look up for your redemption draweth nigh. It's one of the things the Father promised us. But will the biblical wormwood actually, when will it be? Or what will it be? Traditional scholars interpret as a coming asteroid. Others postulate that the eschatological poisoning of 1/3 of the Earth's water and the devastation of our planet's ecology might not be as detectable as we believe. It could hit suddenly and without warning, like an angel of God appearing in the sky with fire and light, bringing judgment in an instant. Anyway, this book also examines the asteroid threats to the Earth, including Apophis, named after the Egyptian god of chaos. It's always fascinating to me what they name these objects in the planets, etc. I mean, all the planets, all the days of the week, all the days of the month on the calendars and things that we have, everything inside is named after evil things. It's like they read the Bible and then they use the bad side. How does this again relate to today? Well, there appeared a woman, great wonder in the heaven, a woman, an Israel bride, which is what that woman in the sky represents, clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. This supposedly happened, I believe, in September of 2017. This is why some people believe that we've already started the 7 years. Some people believe we only have 3.5 years of trials for Jacob. If this is true, and this did occur during that time, then we are in the 7 years, but the really heavy tribulation is about ready to start between now and Pesach. That's why I said the things in the prior teaching on part 1. We need to realize also that, in Joseph's dreams, it was the same with the mother and father representing the sun and the moon. And there's a whole teaching I'll be doing on the 12 constellations. Stephen Ben Noon did a teaching here a month or so ago on how these asteroids are probably coming. And he didn't really point it out, but he had in the background, he just vaguely mentioned that Jupiter was a planet that kind of protected the Earth from many of these objects that are flying around in space. Well, of course, because I have studied the symbology and the names of the Hebrew perspective of the planets, when he said that Jupiter basically protected Earth from mostly from these asteroids, I was like, oh, well, of course, because Jupiter's name in the Hebrew references is Zadik, the righteous one, and it represents Yeshua, and it actually goes to one of the 12 constellations each year, which each of the constellations represents one of the 12 tribes. And when they camped out in the wilderness, they camped underneath in the order of the stars, the Ot, the sign, the constellations, also part of the word for alphabet, Otiot letters. And so there's a reflection on earth of that earthly tabernacle, and then there's a reflection up in the stars in the heaven. And so for every tribe, there's a constellation or an Ot or a sign. And so Jupiter, Zadik, the righteous one, goes and visits or sits once for a year in each tribe in the heavens. So I thought that was kind of fascinating that it was Zadik, the righteous one, Jupiter, that did that. So Revelations 12:2, and she, being with the child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. So we would look at this as the signs in the heavens with Virgo and the crown, and it has usually 9 stars, and then I think it was Jupiter, maybe Saturn, and one other planet that came and lined up to make 12 to represent the 12 tribes. Then the travailing, or the sign in the heaven, would be that we're about to give birth, that Israel is about to give birth to the coming of the Moshiach, in a sense, would be one of the ways to look at it. And that tribulation, that birth pain, is going to begin. So if it did begin in 2017, okay, the pains have been, kind of bad in the last 3 years, but this year we see that it's beginning to increase. And so between now and the birth, if we are there, we're in the last 3.5 to 4 years, then before the return of the Moshiach, then we're going to see a transition, right? We're going to go into pain, into great travail. And again, for those who have natural birth, you really understand this. For those who have not, or have not experienced it, or been around someone who has, then it's really kind of hard to get that. I have a teaching called El Shaddai, the many-breasted one, where I kind of go into that more. So if you want to look that up about natural birth and the many-breasted one, El Shaddai. Okay, and then there appeared another wonder in the heavens, and behold, a great red fire-like dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon the head. Now, these 7 heads, I believe, can also refer to 7 continents, the 10 horns, or the governing powers. There's so many teachings out there and so many ways to look at this. I actually find that one of the teachers that I really give great respect and honor to for her research is Maria Marola Wold on the end times. So I would really encourage you to go to Double Portion and read her information, and or join her Shabbat group meetings online. So we have 7 kingdoms or 7 crowns. I mean, there's all kinds of things here we don't have time for. Revelations 12:4, and his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of the heaven, and did cast them to the earth, and the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered for to devour. So again, is this where we're at? The enemy is ready to devour Yahweh's people because he knows in 2017, when that sign happened in the stars and the heavens, that it's time for the woman to deliver and become, bring back the two kingdoms into one new man, one new kingdom. There's different ways to look at this, okay? So again, we go back to SpaceX, the Dragon rocket, the Great Dragon. Is this part of the Great Dragon, or a symbol, or an outworking of the Great Dragon that is going to be cast down, as in the figs of the satellites? That web is going to be coming down. Is this part of this? Are we looking just for stars? But we could be looking at satellites that are seen as stars from an ancient Hebrew perspective, because it's something that shines in the heavens. And now stars can shine of their own and have their own energy light, or they can be reflections like the moon, or satellites that actually reflect the sun. Planets the same. I mean, look at how beautiful and brilliant Venus is, which in Hebrew is Nagah, which can represent the bride. The morning star is also, one of this references. But when the sun goes, each new moon, when you're looking for the new crescent, that star comes out, and right where that is, right where the sun went down, right when the sun goes down, you'll see it's right there, like it proclaims, okay? And you're going to see where the sun goes down, then the crescent will come up. The new crescent, and you'll see Venus right there. And in the morning, Venus comes up before the sun. So in a symbolism sense, the sun represents Elohim. Okay, it is the one, in the heavens, it is the one with the great power, it's the one with the great light. And in the morning, so it goes away, it disappears every night, right? And then in the morning, up comes Nagah, the beautiful bride, the brilliant one, proclaiming that he's coming. And right behind her comes the sun, or Yahweh. So it's not the same as sun worship. It's something he put into the heavens to show his character, to show, just like he puts trees and he compares trees to man, and he, shows us his order in seashells and in all of creation, and that he has boundaries. Everything he's created shows a part of his character. So anyway, Elyon, the Elon dragon that's up there, is it going to be cast down? Is that dragon spirit, deceiver, destroyer, referring to this? Is this one of the layers to this? He knows his time is short. We have the movie, The Listening. I'm just comparing these to things that could be for today. The mouth was cast forth. The front. There's Revelations 12:15 says, and the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. Well, that word mouth means to cast, to be forth, to front. In the language of Debar versus Deber, life of order and life of death, it can also mean language, is what I'm trying to say, and it can go either way. It can mean to chop. It can be a single stroke, to cut down, to wail, to lament. And so when we see this mouth from the dragon, from the sense of the satellites up there, right? That's exactly what they do. They send out laser beams. They front. They can cut down. You can use them to, to direct drones and technology and blow up people across the earth and not even have to be there. And you can use the soldiers and this kind of technology, all with the use of satellites and imagery. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of the mouth. I don't know if that's a great earthquake, because the dragon in the satellite issue that we're talking about could create a torrential flood or a fire and burn out a whole town or city. We're seeing it. Mega hurricanes, tornadoes where we've never seen them, etc. Earthquakes. So when the earth does something, the dragon does something like a flood, could be a flood of words, digitized energy spoken or projected against her to cause death. But the earth opens up, okay, that water. So we need to look at other ways to maybe translate this. And the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war, because the woman was delivered by what happened with the earth opening up to protect her. And then what did he do? That really ticks him off. So he goes out and he makes war with the remnant of her seed. So there's a couple of camps going on here, okay? There's the woman of Israel. Is that Israel just Judah? Is that Israel of the two houses? What is that that swallows that the enemy's coming against? But then he goes, oh, I'm going to go off over here and I'm going to go after the remnant of her seed. Okay? Could that be us in dispersion? Okay? The people who keep his commandments and have the testimony of Yeshua. See? So we have to I think that we need to look and consider and open our eyes and have a little bit more block logic here. And you know, kind of an example of this is when Jacob came back to present himself back to his father's house, right? And again, this would be perhaps we're all waiting to get back to the father's house. He splits his two households between Leah and Rachel up because he doesn't want them all destroyed at once, right? And then he prostrates himself before Esau, bringing gifts. So he split up his two women or his two wives or households. And so we see a remnant here. There's a split up. There's the remnant of her seed, and then the woman that is protected from that flood. So another thing I want to bring to your attention here is we have high places. Okay, all this Deber, frequencies and energies of destruction and chaos in life are on high places. In ancient Israel and even today, when we go to Israel, there's this place out in the middle of the desert here on the right called Tamar Biblical Park, operated by Blossoming Rose, if you want to check that out online. And this is called Prayer Mountain, and people actually hike up there and pray. And you know, Abraham, they would go to high places and they would pray, and that frequency and that energy of life and the spoken words of Debar, of vibrations and frequencies of energy of life was spoken over the land. Okay, whereas now today the enemy goes to high places and gives us Debar, frequencies of death, causing chaos and sickness. Right. Here's a place. This is Mount Nebo. Now, today, this would be ancient Israel, but today it is in Jordan. And to the one on the left of the building, you can kind of see that cross, like right there in the middle, would be this. Well, it's the snake and the serpent on the banner or the stick. But I'm going to be doing a teaching on how the part of the teaching I'm doing on the Balm of Gilead will be this. It's actually a tav, I believe. Anyway, so you look over here on the right, and now you're looking up there from the top, and you're looking over the Dead Sea into the land of present-day Israel. And just to kind of give you a clue, what you see here kind of looks like a Texas Longhorn thing, but this is kind of what would look like as they would make something like this for a banner. This is I think it's made out of brass or copper. It's probably copper. It was made, I think, by an Italian. This stands at Mount Nebo, looking over, and it's a replica artist interpretation of the serpent on the pole in the desert. And this is also where Abraham looked out over. And when Father, I think, made the promise to him, and I'm not thinking really good right now. It could also have been Moses looking up over the land of Israel, or I might have the two back, but I'm pretty sure it's both. And I'm going to go into a teaching about this snake. This actually can also represent, because a tav, remember, block logic. A tav is a cross and or a beam of wood and or a tree, and this was a sign or a banner. It goes into, you know, Jehovah Nisi is our banner. And I believe this is really tied to the Aleph and the Tav, which is Yeshua, and everything spoken from the Aleph to the Tav from Elohim that heals and brings healing. But that's in a separate teaching that I will maybe do hopefully soon. Okay, so let's look. So if you're standing up here at this place at Mount Nebo, looking on the Jordan side. This is a picture of it. Mount Pisgah, Mount Nebo. Look straight over to Qumran, which Qumran is like laid out. This is where the Copper Scroll, Jim Barfield, I really encourage you to read that book. Shelley Neese wrote about the Copper Scroll on the works of Jim Barfield and what he's doing, and how the Qumran is a layout buried just as the temple, and it goes straight across to Qumran to Jerusalem. And during the days, when was it, Jeremiah? I do a teaching called Shimon in the Tabernacle, What Aroma Are You Offering? And I talk about how the original utensils, because of the prophecy that was given, they buried it they took and dug an 18-mile tunnel from Jerusalem to Qumran and took the original utensils out, the original the original anointing oil and the original, I believe, the Mishkans here, the linens, the flax, etc. The treasures of Israel were buried here. But it looks straight line across from Mount Nebo. And we'll do those in other teachings, but I just kind of wanted to show you where that was. And then, so we're going to hopefully wrap this up here. We're going to encourage you to watch for the two witnesses. Remember, there's 42 months. They're dressed in sackcloth, which I believe is linen. Go to remnantremedy.com, go to Radio Archives, and under Rebuilding the Living Stones, I have one on sackcloth. Because the whole Rebuilding the Living Stones is about how to, basically trying to show you that we're light beings, that we are living stones of light, okay? And I'm looking for them to be raised from the dead on the 7th month, preferably during Rosh Hashanah, Yom Teruah, which is when the 7th trump comes, and it is the time when the king is coronated. And in Scripture, it tells us that is when the kingdom is established, when the Yeshua returns. And so I'm looking at backing up from that for 42 months from a Yom Teruah coming. And then, of course, right after Yom Teruah is Yom Kippurim, the Day of Atonement, Day of Judgment, and then the wedding supper. So what I mentioned in part 1 is that I'm looking at possibly this coming Pesach, if I go back 42 months from this time, that we could be looking at the two witnesses arising up with power. I'm thinking, need to study more, but I'm thinking it's about the same time that the temple is being rebuilt, because it also takes 42 months before the abomination of desolation. And I'm going to keep going because I really want to talk about linen here. I do a whole teaching. I will be recording this hopefully in the next month. I'm hoping to get it done before Sukkot. I taught this 2011 at a Shebrew's conference. Is your wedding garment ready? Nehemiah is rebuilding the walls of the Living Stones Tabernacle. And of course, this in a spiritual sense. So the awakening to linen is amazing because we are about the days of rebuilding the living stone. So let's look at this. Let us be glad and rejoice and give him praise, for the marriage of the Lamb has come and his wife prepared herself. Now, I don't know about you, but prepared means an active verb, and we need to do this. We need to get ready. Not just spiritually, I would say that also physically as much as possible. And to her it was given to be dressed in fine linen, clean and bright, for the fine linen is the righteousness of the set-apart ones. Now, when I saw the word righteousness, after coming to understanding that we are to walk in the commandments as best we can, and the feasts and the Moedim, that basically would say, what is righteousness? Righteousness is observing the Torah, the commandments from Genesis to Revelation, basically. And so to be righteous, or Zadik, or set apart in this sense, because that's what sets you apart from the rest of the world, is because you are living the laws, really the instructions of the Torah, then it is Zadik, and it means it's a mitzvah. It's a commandment. It would be a commandment. So the fine linen is a commandment of the set-apart ones. And I encourage you, I do a show called on Remnant Radio. Go to remnantremedy.com, Radio Archives, to Sheish Linen, not Linen Lovers. I do a reading through most of the book, a pseudepigrapha book, Asenath and Joseph. And once you realize that the wedding garment, like in Matthew, the wedding garment is white linen. Once you realize that, you'll see it all throughout Scripture. But the story of Asenath and Joseph and how they met and how they got married is a fascinating story, and I think parallels Yahweh's people, especially from who the lost tribes of Israel who go whoring and have their idols. But then she realizes she needs to prepare white linen, and then she's going to marry Joseph, which Joseph is a shadow of our Savior. Okay. I really encourage you to read that. I had to edit most of my crying out of that teaching, just reading the scripture, which, maybe you don't call it a scripture, but it definitely follows Torah. And that's one thing I would say about when you're reading pseudepigrapha books or apocryphal books, unless you have the lexicon with the original language and the translation, I only look for the patterns that repeat or parallel the Torah, because with translation things can get a little wacky, and I think there's a lot to be said for these books, many of them, but at the same time, I wouldn't base any of my foundations of them on it unless they match the Torah. This is part 3 of some articles that I've written, part 1 and part 2. We published in our newsletter. And there's a brief overview of the entire thing in one of Dr. Halissa Elowine's The Creation Gospel, I think volume 1 Torah teaching book that she has. I'm in the appendix there with this article, but I've expanded it. So this is actually one of the first times I've presented this publicly. Okay, so because I wanted to finish the whole article in the book, but I haven't. Okay, with more than a shallow study of linen throughout Scripture, one will find that indeed, to discover that fine white linen is the choice of fabric as a wedding garment. This would explain why the man who was invited to the wedding supper in Matthew 22 was taken away. Revelations 19:7 and 8, being wrapped in linen is the righteousness of the saint or set apart ones. In English, the Torah perspective or mindset, we may have lost the importance of what the word righteous or Siddiq means. Being Siddiq or righteous person is defined by whether or not one observes the commandments of the Torah, which are the instructions for us to live by, and the obedience to such things brings blessing and life that one might breathe more abundantly. So again, we talked about how Jupiter is the Siddiq, righteous one. I've already talked about that, him visiting. Okay, fine white linen, shesh. Let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife has made herself ready. And to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, white and clean, for the fine linen is the righteousness of set apart ones. And he said, right, blessed are they which are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said unto these are the true sayings of God. Now, one of the things I want to say is for all you linen lovers out there, my little nitpick on this is make sure you have at least one white set apart garment. If you get nothing else, I say sell all your extra clothes, sell whatever you got to, and invest in one white garment. I don't want to be dogmatic about this, but after studying this for so long, I just feel that it's very possible, I'm not taking my chances on it, that as it was in the first Exodus, one of the simple instructions was to, get the lamb, roast it. Of course, we need to have the lamb, Yeshua, and to stand up and not to lay down and be ready to leave and to put the blood on the doorpost. What if you really think about that, there were 3 basic instructions. And if they didn't do those, then they weren't delivered and they weren't passed over by the death angel. When we look at the properties of linen, when we look at the scorching of the sun and the EMFs and all these different things that relate to linen, that it can maybe perhaps shield us, what if these instructions of that she prepared herself is just as simple as, in order to survive, and not that it's okay to die, it is, but if we want to be part of that exiting, returning Israel from the 4 corners of the earth, is it and could it be just as simple as putting on a white garment and being ready on the night that he keeps vigilance over on a Pesach night? Okay, that's really what I would like for you to think about. And white, sheish is linen, means six. Six is the sixth day, is the day of preparation. White is really, when you look at white, you should be thinking about all the colors of the rainbow. When they all come into unison and are chad, that makes white. And just like a man and a woman, when they come together, they're chad. Yeshua said he wanted his people to be chad, just as he was chad with Yeshua, with Yahweh. So, and we're to reflect his light. And that's what linen does, and it's anti-static. Anyway, those are all the things that to think about, okay, to consider. It is the way, or the ordinance. And, I don't have a bathtub like this anymore, but one of the things I like to do on Sabbath is to put on my white garments and to anoint my head with oil. So I'm going to stop right here with fine white linen sheish for part 2. We're going to do a part 3, which will just be a wrap-up of what happens when we look at linen in the scriptures and how it is, what happens about deliverance, and how many times in scripture this happens, that his people are given linen, because they are given linen. And we need to look at what happens. What does that mean? What does that represent? Okay, so we're just going to leave it off right here with the slide for fine white linen, sheish, with those commandments, and we're going to talk about the very things that happen. What does it mean when someone in Israel or the ancient kingdom or in the future receives white linen? It is a time, we're going to see through the scriptures, of promotion. It's a time of lifting up. It's a time of deliverance. And we're going to go through those scriptures and discuss them. May your garments always be white, and may your head lack no shimmer. Shalom.